Our experts believe that the economic emancipation of women in South Africa would significantly reduce instances of gender-based violence. New research done by the University of Johannesburg and the Shared Value Initiative looks at just how much more the private sector can do to contribute towards that emancipation. The research, titled "The Costly Impact of Gender-Based Violence," was led by Professor Corné Davis in collaboration with Mid-Sweden University and supported by KPMG South Africa. Professor Davis joins us now from the University of Johannesburg. Good evening, Professor Davis. Thanks for your time. I suppose the research in many ways confirms what has long been understood about the patterns of gender-based violence in this country, especially the link to economic independence, the socio-economic independence of women.
Absolutely. The study employed qualitative and quantitative methodology. We engaged with 73 CEOs, directors and leaders in the private sector, as well as run a survey among employees in South Africa to assess what their awareness was of the different kinds of gender-based violence and what their recommendations were for addressing it in South Africa. So we have presented a very comprehensive report on what the opinions were of leaders in South Africa, given that no study had previously inquired about the views of private sector organizations and their awareness of the impact of gender-based violence on the work environment. So this study was the first of its kind, and we were very happy to release this report today.
The difficulty for the private sector in this country is that it simply has not been putting its money where its mouth is. If you look at that gender-based violence response fund that was set up as a way of raising funds from the corporate sector to fight gender-based violence in this country, they had a target of 1.5 billion rand. To date, corporates have only paid into that fund 130 million rand in cash. And it shows the extent to which they simply are not coming to the party.
You know, there's a bigger problem than that. To date, if you look at the business literature, the academic literature, social scientific publications in the field of business and strategic communication, there has not been an inclusion of the topic of gender-based violence. Previously, and even to date, it's not been included in CSI indices or in corporate social responsibility programs. We know that it's a global sustainability objective, but it's not been framed as a business issue. To date, it's been framed as a public health issue, government issue, legal issue. So it's been difficult for private sector organizations to place it within the framework of business, as we established when we engaged with CEOs. So there is a need for academia to up the benchmark and to put it within the framework of business so that it can be placed there and that it can become a topic that we are comfortable to communicate about. If we want business to fulfill its role fully and to understand the role, it's also come out that in the research that although we have statistics, you know, it was difficult for private sector organizations to understand that their employees in the private sector are also form part of the 1 in 6 women that's reported globally, but in a closer number for South Africa is probably 7 out of 10 women that have experienced gender-based violence in their lifetimes. And that understanding is only coming to the front now because we shared that information also in our engagement with leaders in the private sector. And it also came out clearly that employees are very much aware of the prevalence of the problem, but that there's a need for education, that they need to understand the scope and extent because it's underreported, stigmatized, uncommunicated, and that there's also a need for multi-sectoral collaboration so that we can all address the issue together. That, I believe, is we're heading somewhere. Perhaps the private sector has not invested sufficiently yet. But I believe with this kind of work and with the report we have just published, the picture will become much clearer.
Professor Davis, we certainly wish you all of the best in the work that you'll be doing, raising awareness through this report, and hopefully we'll begin to see some changes, particularly coming out of the private sector.